With the release of Sonic X Shadow's cutscenes on the internet, I want to talk about something that's been bothering me for a long time about current Sonic content. Mainly, the sheer magnitude of retcons that hit the series like rain. A retcon, if you don't know, stands for retroactive continuity. This basically means to retroactively change a part of a story that wasn't originally intended to be that way. You can see this most commonly with manga series, like in Shonen Jump, since their length can be entirely up in the air as close to a few weeks before the thing ends, so manga creators often come up with elements of their stories that they reinterpret later down the line. Here's looking at you, Big 3 fans. But of course, we wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't a problem for the blue blur. So what exactly is the problem? Well, put simply, too many of the retcons fucking blow. I know that's a bit harsh, but let's look at the most recent Sonic content to see what I really mean. To address the elephant in the room first, the Sonic community has been going back and forth for a while about Amy's characterization in a post-Frontiers canon, mainly about how her affection for Sonic has been severely toned down. Some may ask why this change in direction has occurred. Has the woke mob finally come to eat our hedgehogs? Is Ian Flynn Satan's greatest soldier? Has Sonic Team just gotten tired of the bit? Honestly, who knows and who cares? If it were so easy to blame someone for this, I promise you I'd have done it already. What I'm far more concerned with is exactly how they've gone about implementing these character changes. Splash Dash recently put it best when he said that you can't really call this character progression for Amy if they're going to go back and change games like Generations and then act like she was always like this to begin with. This problem expands to more than just Amy though, as Generations has a myriad of lines that have been changed to fit a new idea of what the game should look like. Remember when George Lucas went back to re-edit the original trilogy because he had changed his mind about how he wanted the movies to be, and then ended up creating a confusing mess of edits that really had no place changing what was already there? Well, imagine that but with bat tits and you understand how people feel about Sonic X Shadow. It's not enough to retcon Amy's personality, but we also have to retcon how well Sonic remembers every single one of his adventures, or how abrasive the two Robotniks are to each other, or how good Knuckles is at getting his line reads right.
Thanks, Sonic. Now then, tell me, where is the rest of my island?
Amy is the hot button topic right now, but she's really just emblematic of a wider plan to rewrite how these games went in an effort to make them more in line with current content, as opposed to just leaving the games as they are, being the original stepping stones in the story. Though, of course, Sonic X Shadow isn't the only media in which retcons have been present. Sonic Frontiers itself also has a pretty big problem with trying to rewrite history. It's so blatant that a lot of the dialogue feels like a Sonic fan's first draft in trying to address common criticisms of the series' narrative. Why is Knuckles always leaving the Master Emerald despite it being his job? Well, it was actually never that important to him. He leaves if given the slightest push. Why has Tails been so useless in recent Sonic stories? Well, because he himself thinks he's been wildly inconsistent.
Then I'm wildly inconsistent.
Come on, guys, I didn't think you'd ape the criticism word for word. I can tell there's an obvious effort here to streamline the canon and iron out any questions people might have about the series, but hasn't anyone ever heard of a slow burn? If a good way to straighten out a nice shirt is to cleanly and consistently cover the entire area with an iron, Sonic Frontiers is tossing its shirt into an oven. You can't just bash people over the head with fixes and solutions and expect that to make a story good or digestible. Not everyone keeps up with the entire story of the Sonic franchise like hardcore fans do, so trying to shove in answers to questions that other people never asked is just going to come off as damage control for a crack in the wall. And since we're on the topic of people who don't keep up with every single development in this franchise, the retcon that's probably the most confusing to casual Sonic fans is the mystery around who the hell Classic Sonic is. He's Sonic from the past, some might say. Well, Santiago was originally as presented in Sonic Generations, Sonic from the past. But in Forces, Tails refers to him as Sonic from a different dimension. Ignoring people's reaction to this update, the reason seems to stem from Generations itself. The reason Mania canonically doesn't happen to Classic Sonic as of Generations is because Generations itself resulted in a branch universe where there are more Classic Sonic adventures than what canonically happened in modern Sonic's past. This is why, at the end of Mania and going into Forces, Classic Sonic is now an entirely different person who doesn't age into the Sonic that we know now. Sega doubled down on this by introducing new rules about classic and modern dividing lines. Any Archie fans in the audience, don't expect to see modern Mighty and Ray anytime soon, because as far as Sega is concerned, they're classic characters. And disregarding any obvious continuity errors, you'll never see any characters introduced after the Adventure era show up in any classic content, like the comics. Despite the Chaotix having been introduced in the classic era, the modern versions of these characters were reinvented for Heroes, which classifies them as capital M modern characters. Strange, isn't it? Like I mentioned at the beginning, retcons happen all the time in long-running franchises, so this doesn't really come as a surprise. And I understand the desire to want to make things more understandable for a current audience, especially if you've been given the opportunity to work on an older piece in the series. But, if you want to make people less confused about the current story, the last thing you want to tell them is that the stuff they already thought they knew wasn't actually true. A few weeks before the revised cutscenes for Generations came out, I saw people vehemently confirm on Twitter that Sonic definitely remembers the events of 06. But now that the line about the time stones has hit the fanbase, I seem to only ever hear the opposite narrative. The Sonic doesn't remember anything from 06, and the Chaos Emeralds can only time travel in that game specifically for some reason. reason. Do most people even know how Silver time travels in modern Sonic content? Because I didn't, and Silver's my favorite character. Having seen the story of Shadow Generations, I think this is the kind of story streamlining that's actually kinda good. It's been almost 20 years since one of the worst Sonic games released, so it's nice to give people a highlight reel of what Shadow has gone through since then. This isn't me saying that every character should get the individual story treatment. I hope that we moved away from the adventure style for a reason, but that maybe Sonic characters should do a little bit more than just standing around sometimes. If you couldn't tell from a few of my allusions to Archie, I miss Sonic Universe a lot. I think the best thing to have done here is to simply have left Generations alone, though I'm not saying the remaster wasn't nice. If you really want to put effort into streamlining content to straighten out a story, then do it to new content that people can get invested in, as opposed to dancing around the proverbial minefield that is changing a thing people already knew. Except, not like Frontiers. Please don't do it like Frontiers.
What a view! Makes me think of the falls and Mystic Ruins.
Maybe that was the game that really needed its script revised.